And I went to bed like normal, at night, and I'm woken up at 3:33 in the morning by a bright light that enters my room. And the bright light, I'm thinking that I have blinds in my window and they're completely closed, but I can still see the entire room being illuminated from inside. So I get out of my bed and I walk towards the window and I look outside, and in that moment, my entire body paralyzes. Obviously, I'm terrified because even though I've been working on trying to maintain neutrality through my meditation work, being in the presence of these kinds of beings that were just completely, they were not human. First of all, they were 7-foot beings that had larger heads. One of them approaches me, lifts the hand, and I'm hearing in my mind the word calm. And as soon as I hear that, I realize that's not my voice, it's not my mind, this is something external to me. My entire body, from that terror that I'm feeling, completely turns neutral, no emotion, nothing. And it's moving in and out of shape. And as I enter into the craft can feel me, and I can feel the craft somehow. There's some kind of organic consciousness that I'm entering into the technology as I step in. So before me, there are 3 little grays now, shorter ones, probably around 3 feet, 3.5, 4 feet tall. And they're holding this blue prism in front of them. And from that blue prism, there are 8 layers, and each one of them has something inside of them. The first one, they begin to unfold in front of me, and it's this alien language. And I'm the most complex symbols I've ever seen, but they are like mathematical equations. We are kind of existing simultaneously with all fractals of ourselves. It's like we have fractals of ourselves. Our soul is fractalized, and it exists simultaneously in multiple timelines. So, for example, when you are in hypnosis and you tune into a past life, you're not just imagining that. You're actually transporting and existing simultaneously in this moment as well as in that timeline.
Welcome, everyone. So, today we have an interview with Geraldine Orozco, who is an epigenetic psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist. But most importantly, she is a UFO extraterrestrial contactee. So in 2013, she had her abduction experience where she was taken on a UFO craft and was shown quite a lot of crazy stuff. She was also explained that she is so-called hybrid mother, and she was shown her extraterrestrial children, something like 9 of them, who are hybrid, half human, half extraterrestrial. So this is a very controversial topic, and I know there's going to be a lot of skeptics who just going to roll their eyes, probably, hearing about these types of things. I want to say to the skeptics, have an open mind, you never know. She's one of hundreds of women who speak out about these types of topics. For most of these women, they get through similar experiences, time missing, abduction, memories, all sorts of things like that. On top of that, we know that in many religious texts, in many ancient scriptures, we've been hearing about stories of some kind of gods coming from heavens to earth and impregnating women and things like that. Book of Enoch, all sorts of things like that, right? So maybe there is something to it. And this is what she talks about. She explains that the human race is a combination of 3 different bloodlines. That there is this hybridization program where extraterrestrial races try to change their DNA and basically interact with women on Earth. Now, I came across her presentations and her interviews online some time ago, and she has been talking about many other subjects in metaphysics and spirituality, and straight away I could recognize that she knows what she's talking about, because I understand a lot of these subjects, and that she has very extensive knowledge about some of these topics. So I became interested And then I learned that she had some of these experiences. So to me, she appears as a very trustworthy person who is definitely not making any of this up. That's why I suggest to listen to the story and see it for yourself and have an open mind. So before we gonna start, quick announcement. If you like our content, if you listen to our stuff, if you watch my videos, please consider becoming a YouTube supporter, YouTube member. And you can become a YouTube member for as little as $3 a month. And depending on the level of your membership, you can get different perks. So for example, there is an option where you can suggest topics, you can suggest guests, questions to the guests. Have a look at YouTube membership option and consider becoming a supporter so we can continue doing this work, because it's very challenging to try to create content such as this one in the era of censorship, demonetization, and big tech making your life hard all the time. So without your help, this cannot continue. So please, 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 if you are watching regularly and you want us to continue doing this work, consider becoming a YouTube supporter. Also, if you want to start working on yourself, check out my online course, Exit the Matrix. Go to truetheory.com/academy and check out Exit the Matrix online course. This course focuses on figuring out what is blocking you from reaching your goals and helping you to heal these aspects and overcome some of these challenges. It has a guided bonus meditation, which is the heart chakra meditation. A lot of people really enjoy this meditation. And still, there is an option for some of you to purchase this course at half price. So use the coupon code Black Friday together at the checkout and you will get 50% discount. This is still available. So go to truetheory.com/academy and click on one of two options and get yourself the course and use the coupon code Black Friday together. Still, it works. So now let's get into the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Geraldine Orozco. Okay, this is Mike Sigula from truetheory.com, and this is True Theory Podcast. And my guest today is Geraldine Orozco. Geraldine is epigenetic psychotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, Qigong instructor, and medical pranic healer. She's certified as NLP practitioner and is mindfulness-based stress reduction therapist. Geraldine has over 17 years of experience in energy cultivation arts. In 2013, she experienced a life-changing interdimensional contact experience, which resulted in the activation of her psychic abilities. In 2017, she underwent hypnotic regression therapy, and these regressions uncovered a lifelong history of contact with extraterrestrial races. Geraldine has been openly talking about her contact experiences and was featured in various award-winning documentaries and shows, including the documentary series with Demi Lovato, UFO Witness, Half-Light, and other shows and movies. To learn more about her work and her services, you can check out her YouTube channel and other social media channels or visit her website, geraldineorozco.com and hybridmother.com. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for taking time to speak to me today.
It's a pleasure.
You have some very interesting experiences, and one of the first questions I always ask people who want to have these conversations is, what was your journey like? We like to say, what was your awakening like? And I'm kind of a little bit familiar because I listened to some of your interviews and presentations, but maybe you could kind of summarize with us, like, what was your life like until now, let's say, and especially in terms of your awakening journey and your experiences. If you could give us just a summary.
Sure. So first of all, I was raised in a very spiritual family. So I was meditating and kind of studying alongside my parents, particularly my father, doing research on different religions, different beliefs, schools of beliefs, everything from Buddhism to Zen to, Sufism. We kind of started out in the Gnostic church. So studying a lot of Gnosticism and just being aware of that very, very deep practices of mindfulness, and started meditation. So I had experiences since a very early age. Since the age of 5, I'm having experiences where I see white lights coming into my room, and then missing time in between those experiences. And they happened very specific times in my life, several times at the age of 16, age of 22, age of 24. In 2013, in 2008, I opened a meditation school here in the Bay Area, just to share, basically sit down, share meditation. And that turned into a business, essentially, that went into training corporate meditation for companies like Facebook and Google, all of these companies in the Silicon Valley. And essentially, it really just refocused my attention to this kind of mindfulness practices. So I became certified in mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy, Qigong. I went into this realm of studying a little further into understanding these modalities. But it wasn't until 2013 that I decided to go deep into my own practice. And I took about 4 months out of my career, my company. I had other businesses as well. And I began to meditate by myself in a retreat to answer some profound questions that I had. My questions were, what was love? That was the number one question. I realized at that age, I didn't even understand what love was. I had all kinds of programming about love, and I had all kinds of concepts about what it was to be a human, our identities and things like that. And I realized that my identities and ideas that I was holding on to really didn't match what truly authentically was being felt inside of me. So I went into a deep deprogramming phase. It took like 4 months of deep meditation, maybe up to 9 hours a day. And
Wow.
it's here where I really started to go into deep subconscious programs, ancestral belief systems that were brought down through my family lineage. I began to unpack that. And I discovered, essentially doing this work, I began to activate my own intuition. But essentially uncovering a lot of secrets and stories and things about my family that nobody had known, that really helped me understand, where I was coming from.
Can I sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
So can you tell me what type of meditation you were doing at that time? And when you say about uncovering stories about your family, was it just like your intuition started guiding you towards some kind of answers, or how it manifested?
Yeah. So to be clear, even though I studied many different religions, wasn't finding my home within those religions. I wasn't finding the answers to these questions in those religions. And of course, there's many layers to these schools of belief systems. But, I would search and go to conferences and try to find the answers through different teachers. But at the end, I discovered that just sitting with my own emotions and following and unpacking those emotions was really what really got me to get to the information that I really needed, my own truth. And basically sitting with those emotions opened up sub layers of emotions. And those emotions are kind of like memory. They're data banks of memory that are embedded in the emotion. And they are memories that we pick up subliminally and subconsciously, kind of in the realm of our experiences. So what I realized was that, our body stores a lot more than we are conscious about. And that's how I began to recall those memories and allow me to understand better what was happening in these childhood experiences, for example, that I had no recollection of before. And allow me to piece together memories of family members. And that opened up that practice of meditation. So the kind of meditation that I teach now is this modality that I created called DNA reprogramming. By following these emotional trails, getting to the root cause of the emotion. And at the same time, you're training your intuition, because it's actually through the sensory emotional body that we store this information. And so when you open that up, you can actually access information about let's say it's a memory with a parent. You open up their data bank as well. And you begin to tune into the information and the history of their memories. So there were family secrets, for example, things that happened within our family, lots of traumas and experiences that I began to uncover by picking up these emotional memories. And it really made me clearly understand the roles that all these family members were playing in the programming, that I was taking on. So what happened at that point was that I was deconstructing kind of my belief systems, first of my family, first myself, then my family, then beginning to question, where does his family get these ideas? And then going really deep into societal structures, social engineering, and deeper into, cultural ideas, norms, religion, the influence of religions. And it basically took me all the way back to the very origin of the human race, in this meditation, where I began to question, well, what's behind these structures? What brings forth humanity? What's the driving force behind humanity? And it's at that point, precisely in October of 2013, that I had this experience on Friday night, actually Friday the 13th. And I went to bed like normal, at night. And I'm woken up at 3:33 in the morning by a bright light that enters my room. And the bright light, I'm thinking that I have blinds in my window and they're completely closed, but I can still see the entire room being illuminated from inside. So I get out of my bed and I walk towards the window and I look outside, and in that moment, my entire body paralyzes. And I feel myself being brought through the wall. So I feel my body completely stretching or feeling as if it's being dissolved, going through the wall, and I end up on the other side of this room. And essentially, my room is on top of the garage, so it's right on top. And so right on top of that landing of the garage roof, this white light, and everything is completely still all around me in my neighborhood. Not a single person, no wind, no air, no movement. Everything is like frozen, suspended somehow. And obviously I'm terrified, because even though I've been working on trying to maintain neutrality through my meditation work, being in the presence of these kinds of beings that were just completely, they were not human. First of all, they were 7-foot beings that had larger heads. They look like large ant type humanoids, if I would be able to just describe it as best as possible. Muscular bodies, gray from top to bottom, no clothing. And their eyes were really huge, really huge, so very black eyes. And the terror, obviously, that overcomes me, because I had never conceived such a thing. And, at that time, it's been many years that I'm talking about 15 years that I'm not watching TV, not watching films, not really getting my mind very busy with any kind of fantasy things. So it was just very shocking for me. And I didn't know what it was. But the being of the 6, from the white light emerges 6 beings. Of those 6, one of them approaches me, lifts the hand, and I'm hearing in my mind the word calm. And as soon as I hear that, I realize that's not my voice. It's not my mind. This is something external to me. My entire body, from that terror that I'm feeling, completely turns neutral, no emotion, nothing. And I realize these beings have a lot more power than me. So I'm being taken with them. basically I am guided on board this light, which is a lenticular light that is moving in and out of shape. But it is a metal, but it's like a plasma metal, almost as if you were to look at mercury, but in a complete luminosity, mercury that has a luminosity, and it's moving in and out of shape. And as I enter into the craft can feel me, and I can feel the craft somehow. There's some kind of organic consciousness that I'm entering into the technology as I step on it. And again, I'm in my pajamas, I'm in my nightgown. So, I'm feeling. Yes.
Sorry, can I ask you? So you're kind of pulled into the ship through some kind of force or something like that?
No, I'm being guided. I'm being guided by them. Like
You
we're literally
walked,
walking. Right? Well, to be completely honest with you, I don't remember actually walking. That's the thing about it. So, but of course, at that point, I didn't really have very much control over my body. I just felt numb because I guess they removed all the sensation from my body. But I remember that when I stepped on board the craft, then I can feel the sensation of the craft and the acknowledgement of this technology, this incredible technology. And it was an organic technology. It's not something that has nuts and bolts and it's one piece. Yeah.
And this is the triangular UFO?
No, this is a lenticular craft. So it's kind of like an oval shaped craft. And it's really huge, but when you go inside, it actually looks a lot bigger than what it looks outside. I don't know how to explain that, but the light that was emanating from it is kind of like a silverish, purplish blue light. When you approach that metal, that metallic substance, that's what it would look like. And so as I enter into the craft, it had two hallways, one going to the right, one going to the left. As I'm walking down this curved hallway to the left, the 5 of the other beings go up ahead, and the one that's guiding me creates this holographic imagery of a fake field with a blue sky and green grass, almost as if they're trying to hide the interior of the craft and just distract me with this holographic image. But the image has this little white paved road, which I am basically made to follow, this hologram. And as I follow that, I'm led into this gigantic triangular glass building within the craft. This is the imagery, the hologram they're creating for me. And I enter into that building, and I turn around. And as I'm looking at the little path that I came from, there are 2 tall gray beings. And in the center is my aunt. And she's in her nightgown. She's unconscious. Her hair is a mess, and she's walking, but she's not looking where she's walking. She's just completely unconscious, as if she was sleepwalking. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to call out her name, trying to figure out what she's doing there. She doesn't hear me. No sound comes out of my voice, and she just walks, and they take her through the hologram to the right and disappears. And at that moment, I began to feel terror again because I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand what she was doing there. But they removed this hologram, and I find myself inside of this room that probably it could seem like it was some kind of control room of some kind. On the right side of the room, there's this oval table, and there are holograms of planets with blue light, absolutely beautiful, absolutely complex.
And I want to ask you something, sorry.
Yeah.
So with your aunt,
yes.
Do you think she was there, or was it a part of the image, holographic image, to kind of show you something familiar?
Yeah, well, she was there, and I will explain why in a minute, because something happened years later that was just shocking about this experience that included her. So I will share about that. But just as a side note, remember that she was there, that I saw her there in her nightgown, okay? And so anyway, looking at this room, there are lights and panels, and when I'm looking at the ceiling, I'm realizing that I can see through. It's a translucent craft, and I'm seeing stars beyond that. And so before me, there are three little grays now, shorter ones, probably around 3 feet, three and a half, 4 feet tall. And they're holding this blue prism in front of them. And from that blue prism, there are 8 layers, and each one of them has something inside of them. The first one, they begin to unfold in front of me, and it's this alien language. And I'm the most complex symbols I've ever seen, but they are like mathematical equations, let's say chemical, mathematical equations. That's the closest thing that I can describe it to. And I try very, very hard to make sense of what I was seeing, but I only recognize a couple symbols, like, for example, the infinity symbol. There were dots, and there were some strange symbols, and also a symbol that I used to draw as a child. And I'll talk about that more later. But there's these little hints within these experiences that help you understand that you're having these experiences and more times in your life. And so the more I would relax, the communication was telepathic. I would receive imagery in my mind, actually. And the way that they communicate are in universes. So, their concepts are extremely, extremely expansive. They include yourself, let's say your country, the world that you live in, the solar system, the galaxy, and then the universe that you live in. That's how they deliver one thought, if you can think of communicating that way. So, it was mind-bending. And after they removed that, the next layer of that prism, they begin to show me 8 little, seven lights. And I recognize these lights are organized in the form of the Pleiadian constellation. And as a child, I used to pray to this constellation. I don't know why. I just have this very, very strong memory of always going outside and praying to it for some reason, but I recognize it. And they took me, essentially, they show me the planet Maya in this constellation. Alcyone is the largest star within that constellation, and Maya is, I think, the 3rd largest of that constellation, but they take us there. And when we arrive at this planet, within the planet, they begin to show me that I was a part of these Pleiadian beings. And actually, they show me myself existing here in the Pleiadian, in this planet.
But that was downloads you're receiving to kind of, or you moved with the ship to that planet?
Moving,
Okay,
traveling with them.
So it was like instant, and you found yourself down?
Correct. Yes. I mean, it's an instant that here it boggles the mind, because our understanding of time and space is very specific. So the only way that I'm can understand this is that we're literally traveling through some kind of wormholes where our limited understanding of physics, it doesn't quite work that way. So
another thing I want to mention. So not sure if you're familiar with Gosha Dushak. She has a YouTube channel. They claim to have contact with a group of Pleiadians from Taygeta. And they talk about Maya, a planet that apparently Mayans, in South America actually came from Maya. They, they're humanoid, but they originally were extraterrestrials. Some of them came back or something like that. So that's a kind of interesting bit. I'm not sure if you ever heard about it or anything about that.
Yes, and actually that's correct. That's also what I have seen in my trial, because it's not just about the name, but it's the frequency of technology. If you study deeply the technology there within the Mayan ancient culture, their numerical system, their calendar system, and the way that they have this information about astronomy is incredibly advanced. But myself having the experience of going to this planet and interacting with these beings, in fact, their entire culture is based on advanced numerology and the understanding of the connection between the organism in the universe and the role that we play. So that's very much a Pleiadian concept. And there's many layers to this Pleiadian concept that are both positive and negative, as with everything. And of course, the Pleiadian bloodline, which is part of the inheritance of human race, is very deep. It runs very, very deep, and it plays a big role in a lot of the subconscious aspects of our culture as a human race, including elements like Christ consciousness and things like that, were all things that we adapted from this Pleiadian consciousness. And we see that around the world, not just in the Mayan culture, because it's a, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I actually, because, one of the other things they talk about, the Tegetan crew, let's say, they say that, original humans are from Lyra, so, which is, I think, is a star in Pleiades. And a lot of humanoids had to leave because of the wars with Draco reptilians, and they basically expanded to different stars and different systems. And humans on Earth are kind of like, we are their ancestors or something like that. So technically, we are them, or at least, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Because
Yes.
Go
ahead.
No. What's your view? Because you talk about 3 different bloodlines, right? Mixed over periods of time, right?
That's correct. And actually, these concept of these wars, these Draco-Reptilian wars, you see, what I see is that was a certain timeline, but we have to understand the nature of our reality. We are existing in infinite timelines simultaneously. And perhaps somebody brought the information about these wars, which is relevant and has some kind of influence on our human race. But there are many timelines, including the one I'm going to tell you right now, because what I have experienced is that the human race has specific different origins. There are 3 main bloodlines, as you mentioned. But these 3 bloodlines are not pure. They're also hybridized bloodlines. And one of them is a Draco-Reptilian kind of bloodline. The other one would be the most humanoid Pleiadian type of bloodline. And the other one would be kind of reptilian bloodline. And these 3 bloodlines from there are part of a hierarchy of consciousness that is originating from the source. And one of the best depictions of what I have seen to explain this information is the story of the Book of Enoch, which describes how we descend from the original source into the unfoldment of humanity. But I feel that all of these races, the species of these alien or interdimensional, I call them interdimensional. I don't use the word alien. It doesn't really make sense to me. Interdimensional races and species are ranges of vibrational frequency that are organized. And we are descendants of that. Absolutely. That I see 100%, because in our own biology, we hold within our biology and also within our psychological archetypal structures, we hold these vibrational essences within ourselves, and they make up who we are. And what I see with my work now with contactees is that a lot of these experiences, they run in the family lineages. So, for example, in my family, the connection with Pleiadian and Arcturian and Lyran, extremely strong. And most of the family members in my family have had experience with these beings. And it's not something that we just imagine, but separate experiences, separate studies brought together and compared. It's pretty interesting. And I do find this in many families, that actually people have very strong connections with specific lineages.
My family as well. We learned quite a lot about some of our connections with Draco reptilians. I had my experiences on psychedelics where I would jump into these lifetimes and see myself in these bodies, and my cousin as well. And then I would see my dad and things like that, my ex-girlfriend. she remembers some of these lifetimes as well. So it's kind of interesting how we incarnate in groups.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
But some of us, for example, like in my family, some of us are still service to self, and other ones kind of shifted. And I had interactions where they were not very happy about my work now. We had some very tough interactions.
Sure.
But let's come back to what's happening on the spaceship, because we kind of
Yes.
moved away, and there's some interesting stuff happening.
Yeah. So just to quickly resume, so I'm in the Pleiades, and I'm being shown two different timelines in this Pleiadian planet, where they are showing me as a Pleiadian being, and in one of the lifetimes. So I cannot explain how this. First of all, we are traveling and moving interdimensionally. Okay, so this we're not traveling at the speed of light. We're traveling much faster than the speed of light, in which we are simultaneously interacting with these dimensional planes. Okay, so they are showing me one timeline, another timeline of myself in the planet to let me understand that I have been Pleiadian, maybe couple lives, many lives, and what I'm doing. So first,
they would show you.
Correct. Yes.
In form of visions, or
no, just took me to the planet, to the place, and actually show me myself there. So I'm seeing myself existing. So if you can imagine an experience here on Earth where you see an orb of light. Okay, so imagine that I'm inside that orb of light. Okay, looking at myself here. So this is what's happening in this case. We are traveling interdimensionally, and we are existing somehow physically in the timeline that they're showing me. Okay, and so yeah.
Yeah, so this is a little bit like Daryl Anka can try to channel Bashar, who is like his future self, and this is your past self, or something like that.
Yeah, and it's not a channel. It's like
I mean, I mean, but just the version of you that you encountered was like your previous self, or simultaneously existing?
Simultaneously existing. Okay. And I talk a lot about this because what I discovered by studying all these things is that there's kind of an architecture to these non-physical realms. And we are kind of existing simultaneously with all fractals of ourselves. It's like we have fractals of ourselves. Our soul is fractalized, and it exists simultaneously in multiple timelines. So, for example, when you are in hypnosis and you tune into a past life, you're not just imagining that. You're actually transporting and existing simultaneously in this moment as well as in that timeline, which you have access to through your vibrational frequency. And that's how the information is able to be accessed through quantum non-locality. So if you understand how quantum non-locality functions, we kind of tune in to these vibrational frequencies in alignment with ourselves. So this is what's happening in this situation, that we're kind of, I'm traveling with them to these timelines, and I'm in the presence of my own, my future. There's no past or future in myself here. And they show me as a man with a long white beard, a very tall white being with blue eyes. And another timeline where I am a woman, and I am teaching to a crowd of people, like thousands of people. And I don't know what I'm speaking about in that moment, but I'm led to understand that it's something about similar to what I'm doing today. Now, in 2013, I was still in my business, in my entrepreneur phase of my life. So I was not, I couldn't imagine in a million years that I would be doing what I'm doing today. Okay, so completely not think about that. So they bring me back into the craft. They begin to show me the prism once again. And from the next layer of the prism, 8 little lights appears. And from those 8 little lights, 4 of them manifest in front of me, these 4 children. And at first I look at the children and I realize these are not just human children. Although they look very human, they are a combination of a different kind of species, because the structure of the body is different. They're more thin, the skin is more gray, more translucent. They have these larger heads, and the size of the pupil is about the size of our ocular socket, the pupil itself. So, just completely shocking to encounter these beings. But the most shocking thing is that I can recognize myself in the child, and it's almost as if you're connecting with a relative. So I realize and I recognize immediately I'm related to these children, and maybe these are my children. And when I connect, make eye contact with the child, I immediately have this. I first of all, I feel completely naked because the child sees right through me. It's this kind of look that they can sense and feel everything I'm thinking and feeling. And I begin to remember memories of being with these children, holding them in my arms, giving birth to them. And I was completely shocked as to where those memories had been, because I can understand how I can have a child and not remember something like that. So it was very difficult, but I had to immediately, my concern was for the children. So I was immediately moving through my emotions and saying, okay, well, I guess I have to be here with these children to take care of them. But as those memories started to come back, there were there's a little boy, two little girls. One of these little girls had very blonde hair and blue eyes. And I was shocked to recognize this little child, because as a child, I had a reoccurring dream that my mother would emerge from a white light, and she would be holding with her hand this little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. And I was confused, because I said, well, is this going to be my future sister or my child in my future? And so this is a very important element of the hybridization experience and the presentation process that actually happens very commonly with contactees, that a family member will present the child in a dream to the person many times. It's a reoccurring dream. It's a very common phenomenon of the hybridization program.
To make it familiar, or?
To make it familiar, yeah. Yeah, so it's a little bit complex in regards to why they do this, but in our biology, for example, organisms that bond with the mother survive longer. Okay, there's an imprint, there's an energetic imprint that is occurring between the mother and the child. And so I believe that this is something that is occurring, that they create these presentation scenarios to present the children to the parent, essentially, both men and women. This is happening. So a lot of my clients, for example, they're having dreams of children, children that are being brought to them, presented to them, taking care of them. And they're very specific scenarios. It's not just random dreams. The children don't really look quite human. There's someone presenting it to them, which is a very interesting scenario. And they will use familiar people. Some people see angels bringing the children. Some people see Jesus. Some people see their aunt, their favorite aunt. Just so that it can seem intentional and that it's related to them. So anyway, that was shocking to see the child, but I recognized her immediately. And this was a dream that I would have very, very often and extremely vivid. Okay. So
when you were a child?
When I was a child. Yeah. And so the other one was a little bit older. He's a taller boy, and he's kind of reptilian. He's a humanoid / reptilian. And when I saw, I was completely shocked, because I never saw something like that in my life before. And I didn't even know about reptilians back then. I didn't understand any of this, right? So the children connect with me, and they're taken into the room. And I began to get very emotional, because I said, well, what's the point of this meeting if I'm not going to interact with them? And what I heard telepathically is, don't you understand? That's what they're telling me. Don't you understand? And they begin to show me a holographic image of a tulip, which they zoom in to the molecular level of the tulip, and they begin to show me the atoms, the oscillation, the networks of energy that are being created to create that tulip. And they begin to show me essentially how the world is very much a construct. It's a holographic construct of information. And we, as souls encapsulated inside this physical vessel, exist within this kind of holographic construct. And that being explained, showing me the connection between the human race and the universe as a whole, and how we are not separate in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in my life, I experienced the most incredible peace that you just have never experienced, of being completely interconnected to the universe, but still your own individual entity of observation somehow. So, you know, the next thing I know, I open my eyes. I'm on the edge of my bed, hanging on the side of the bed. And I have burn marks over here underneath my eyes, above my cheeks. My feet are dirty. Okay. And I'm sitting down. I sink down to the floor. My body's shaking. It's hurting. My entire body's hurting, like I got hit by a truck. And I'm immediately thinking I need to call the police. I need to call the hospital, something, you know, to figure out what to do in that moment. And as I reached for my phone, the time was 6:15 in the morning. So the time was from 3:33 in the morning to 6:15 in the morning. And I began to cry because I was thinking, you know, it's going to sound ridiculous for me to call the police station, tell them what happened. They're going to think I'm crazy. So it just wasn't, I didn't know what to do. So after being emotional, I grabbed a notebook and I began to draw the symbols that I saw, that I could remember, as many of the symbols that I could remember inside a notebook. And I put it to the side. Basically, I couldn't do anything the entire day. I slept the entire day until the next day, 24 hours. And the next day, I talked to my parents about what had happened to me. And I was very shocked to find that my parents had also had these kinds of experiences. And it was shocking to me because it was the first time in my life that I had openly communicated about these kinds of experiences. And they made it seem so normal, right? So I'm freaking out thinking these guys are going to think I'm crazy, or, you know, I'm on drugs. I don't take any kind of drugs of any kind or any stimulants because I'm very sensitive. And, you know, they told me, oh, yeah, we had those experiences too. I have many dreams about these crafts, about these beings. So, you know, I was confused what to do with the experience. So the next day I go to my work and I'm teaching meditation to my client in my office. When my client walks in, I'm seeing these incredible fields of light around her body. I'm seeing and sensing her emotions in my body. Everything she's thinking, what she ate this morning, what she's going to do today, everything is just open. And, essentially, what had happened is that it activated these psychic abilities for me. And I began to give her information about what she was going to be doing in her court case. She was going through a divorce, a court case. And I gave her information that was essential to that day in the court case. And, you know, I didn't know how this happened. Okay. So I couldn't leave my house for 3 months after this experience. I couldn't leave my house. And it took many years to integrate that. So I started learning about energy. I started studying about energy bodies, so I can understand and translate the information that I was seeing, and essentially teach myself how to master my own energy body and cultivate these intuitive abilities, because I wasn't able to have any kind of boundaries at that point. And yeah.
Sorry. So I want to kind of mention a little bit my story, because some of the experiences were similar. So basically, you know, I was also experimenting a lot with meditation and Qigong and different healing modalities similar to Reiki, distant healing, and things like that. And it feels like it was preparing me for some kind of activation, because same like in your case, because you had this instant, you know, upgrade where you became sensitive and your psychic abilities open up. But it looks like it happened, you know, when you took a break and you decided to meditate intensively. So in a way, your system was open already, prepared for this kind of activation, right?
Yeah.
And I had this kind of similar thing where I was already practicing these things. I got into Qigong just because I thought it's going to help me with my joints and things like that. Completely didn't think it has something to do with prana and Qigong. And then I had this one-time experience where I had a Kundalini awakening, but it happened when I smoked a little bit of weed and I went to bed, and I had this kind of white light appeared in front of my forehead and started sending me electric shocks for around 40 minutes, but it was very positive. And since that day, I became way more sensitive to energies, and it stayed with me till today. So it's kind of seems to be some pattern, when you have some kind of activation, whatever the method or technology is used, but you need to kind of clean the pipes before, because it's basically you have to prepare yourself for it. Yes. I've heard about different people who had these types of experiences. Wasn't maybe on the ship.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So yes, and so the way that I explain it is that precisely because we're moving in and out of different dimensions, our body is adjusting to these different dimensions we're constantly moving in and out of dimensions, but our awareness of them is what will help us keep the memory of the interaction in that dimension. And memory is actually, it's a bioelectrical, biochemical, and etheric system of our body. The more memory we recover, the more we activate abilities and things within the body, because it's just very interconnected. So when we move into these dimensions, we have these experiences. We think that we're out of body, but the body is experiencing and adjusting to the vibrational frequency that we access. The way that I see it is that we are activating DNA. Okay, what does that mean? It seems to be such a common thing to be saying nowadays, but actually the mechanics of the activation of DNA is pretty complex, because it has to do with the amount of gray matter that we're growing in the brain and also down the spine, which allows us to create more conductivity in the body. And the more that we are more conducive to life force in the body, it sustains higher bands of frequency. So that's why meditation is the groundwork. Without meditation, you can't go anywhere that will be sustained and integrated, right? And so there's you are training the physical body in order to be able to sustain your navigation of higher dimensions. And this is a...
Sorry, do you think that when you do a lot of these energy exercises like Qigong or meditation, that you actually allow to connect to these other aspects of yourself which are multidimensional, like your higher self, or let's say if your body is multidimensional, you kind of tune into these other aspects of yourself? That's why you can get these upgrades or something. Because sometimes I notice that if I do Qigong, I get these downloads that are more frequent, and they seem like, I don't know, it seems like higher self or something, because they're exactly what I need, or kind of helping me with some things.
Yeah.
But it almost seems like they come from me, but I know there are downloads, but they would come from me knowing myself, because it's exactly in the way I would talk to myself. So I feel like maybe through just cleaning myself with Qigong or meditation, or somehow I'm accessing these other layers that are non-physical. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure it out how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I teach extensively about this on my channel. But we are multidimensional energy bodies. Okay, so the physical part of us is only 1 to 2% of the DNA. Okay, so the DNA is writing the protein that creates this physical body. It's only 1 to 2%. Okay, the rest of the DNA, which we have been told is junk DNA, actually there are many complex systems that are being intercommunicated within the non-physical and the physical part of our organism, because we are both. And the science now being able to support these through the study of the morphogenetic field. Okay, so we have a morphogenetic field, which is essentially the instruction manual that brings this physical vessel into the form of what we are. So there's a lot of information being passed here. And the kind of information that we access from the DNA, that's why DNA activation is so powerful, which is essentially recovering your memory. How do you recover the memory? Is it's a wave. It's a sine wave. It's a frequency. It's like a radio dial that when you tune your radio dial of your physical body to a certain frequency, you begin to open up to those informations that are available for you in that frequency. So when you do Qigong, for example, or when you're doing pranic healing or energy work like this, you are moving denser energies out of the body, or you're transmuting them. And this is raising your vibrational frequency, which allows you to open up to these higher bands of information. But those bands of information are existing all the time. It's just depending on whether you are clearing your energy in order to be in alignment and in resonance. It's actually a resonance that is occurring.
Yeah, it seems like, even when I had because I've done a lot of work through psychedelics, and obviously everyone has different ways, different paths. But for me, they worked really well to help me to understand a lot of these things, because I could jump into different lifetimes, jump into different densities, all sorts of things like that. Yeah. Sometimes when I would be in those bodies, seeing these past lives, in different star races, I could feel everyone around me. So because, in higher densities, you're kind of more of an energy being, right? So
exactly. Yes.
You cannot hide the emotions, you cannot lie, because we feel each other, right? So it kind of makes sense if, let's say, here we are more dense, and if we allow flow of prana, to increase, we kind of raise the frequency, and then we become more sensitive, and we start feeling more. And this is really allows for senses to evolve and open to these higher senses, right?
Exactly.
It kind of makes sense. It's a science in a way, but
very much so. Well, our bodies are made up of chakra system. As you know, the energy centers in the body function like routers of information. So the chakras actually are processing the data from the DNA into the physical vessel. And also that's where we pool programs, subconscious belief systems, which are then allowing you to experience the emotions that you have. Emotions are actually one of the most powerful aspects of the human, because emotions are bioelectrical charges that we put into this holographic construct. We input through our emotions into the system. So this is also important for contact, because as what I noticed in my own experiences, because I've had many experiences after that, obviously conscious experience, that emotions kind of tend to pollute the space when you enter into these crafts, or when you're in the presence of these beings. They are very, very intentional with their presence. So as you mentioned, certain emotions that you feel, they don't waste their time having complex, confused emotions. They're completely in the present moment, aware of what they're experiencing, and there's no judgment. So there is no necessity to be pulling into these emotional belief systems, because they create major fluctuations in your frequency field. So, for example, if you're next to a draconian or a reptilian, boy, the energy of those beings are so deep and dark. It's just completely different, and you can feel it. And actually just being in their presence triggers those kinds of memories as well, and those emotions.
Yeah, they can be kind of very aggressive, and it's very much out of coherency, like very, very kind of ego aggressive behavior, right? Do you have anything?
Well, yeah. One time I was taken on board a craft, these draconian motherships, you can say, okay? Because as a child, I was very intuitive as well, and I had many dreams of being taken with these draconians as a child, for utilized for remote viewing, utilized for giving information, and it's because the bloodlines, they're very interested in blood, because again, your DNA is the key to your ancestral intergalactic history. So this is what is preyed upon by more parasitic races. They prey upon that because it's access to a soul. And so these Draco-reptilian beings, in the craft, their craft is not using any kind of technology. It uses the intention of the people navigating this craft. And the energy inside of that craft is like the most horrifying things that you can think of in your life. If you push yourself really hard to think the most horrible things, that's the kind of energy that is, they exist within these beings. That's what they feed off. But I do want to mention that my perspective of these kinds of races has kind of changed over the years into not being more of a, talking about a species or trying to separate these beings. What I learned is that it's about vibrational frequency, and that in this construct, we are here to experience duality. So there's always this light and this dark energy. So I don't really see the Draco-reptilians as something negative anymore. I think that they play an important role to the duality in this construct. But I think it's completely up to us to neutralize those Draco-reptilian roots that we have within us and bring it into this higher vibration, because this is why we are accessing those that consciousness,
Yeah, exactly. They cannot exist without our free will and our choices. So they're kind of shadow aspects of our own behaviors and our own, because they only feed if people allow that, if they make these choices. Yeah. So if people start changing, they don't have anything to do here, right?
Yes, yes, and actually the way that this construct works is that they already exist. So it's kind of both ways. They exist because us, and we exist because them. That's how deeply interconnected and interdependent we are, especially in this three-dimensional plane. All of these archetypes, because the Draconians represent a very specific archetype of humanity, and we have it within our subconscious mind. So the alchemization and the transmutation of that life force that exists within each of us is what will elevate us out of the resonance of interacting with these beings. And this is why we're at such an interesting point in human evolution right now, that we are going through some kind of shift in vibrational frequency collectively, where all of these shadow parts of humanity are coming to the surface, and we're having to face them. We're having to hear about all these horrific things that humanity has done for centuries in order to bring consciousness. And in reality, we don't really have free will until we understand what that means. And the only time to have free will is, first of all, the deprogramming of your matrix programming. So basically all of the indoctrination, these belief systems of limiting beliefs, and the ignorance of the use of life force, especially primordial life force, which is sexual energy. Because the inversion and the manipulation of sexual energy is what is being utilized for hybridization programs, and also by these Draco-reptilian shadow government programs in the earth, are all utilizing the inversion of that life force. So the more that the human becomes aware of the mastery of these energies, this is how they begin to evolve and transcend into, a higher state of awareness. And our hope now, what we're working on right now for the next 10 years, is that hopefully more of humanity is kind of moving towards that transmutation process. Now, this doesn't mean that the darkness will be gone. It doesn't mean the reptilians left this universe, the Draconians are gone, the Pleiadians, no. What it means is that we are integrating, and we're becoming a unified consciousness. We are dissolving the illusions of race and separation from duality into a unity consciousness. And that's really what we're doing. That's the hope.
Yeah, this is the idea of shift into, let's say, 4D, 5D, and entering that Christ consciousness. And even in the book of Enoch, they talk about the end times, how like the righteous ones will have the earth for themselves, and the selfish or whatever, they will have the end of the world and things like that. So it's kind of like a split of timelines depending on your polarity. How are you more service to self or service to others? This is the version of reality you're gonna experience in a way. But actually, this is another interesting topic I wanted to ask you about. What do you think about the shift into these higher densities? Because many people think that we are entering fourth density at the moment, and this is something all these cultures talked about, Mayans or in the Bible or Hopi. What do you think it's gonna look like? Some people think that there might be like economic collapse. Maybe some other think that maybe there's going to be some transformation of this economic system into something more sustainable. Because let's say it seems like we're resonating with a positive timeline, because I think, I've been getting a lot of insights about that for years. And I was being shown how these things look like. And even on psychedelics, I could see the timelines sometimes. I could enter into a state where I could exactly see how reality on Earth is actually connected with my own choices and behaviors. And I was being warned about negative timelines before COVID. I was getting warnings about that for years, and I didn't fully understand like how it's gonna look like. I was being shown that everything's gonna get dark, and it's gonna be some kind of drastic things. But then seems like we moved away from the negative timeline, and we are on the positive one. What do you think is going to be happening over the next, let's say, 20 years? Because obviously we are moving faster and faster. And do you think we already entered the 4D, let's say, officially? We're kind of past the split?
Yeah, so the way that I look at it is a little bit differently. Maybe, I don't know. I think that we are constantly moving out of different dimensions all the time. So I don't see that we're moving into specifically 5D. Like, I'm not really sure what people mean by that, because we are constantly moving in and out of different dimensions individually. Remember that this experience is very individual, okay? Because we have universes within ourselves that we are projecting, and then collectively we create this world that we are coexisting within. And so that being said, our personal influence in the direction of what the human race is going to experience collectively has a lot to do with our internal personal work. So the alchemization of our shadow within is a direct reflection of what happens collectively. And I think that we experienced that very viscerally over the past 3 years with the pandemic, in order to understand how people are consciously choosing and waking up from the illusions that are being fed to us through the technologies that we connect with. So what my reference is going to come by looking at the models of advanced civilizations of other species and what they have gone to in other timelines. All of these species have gone through these transition phases the way that we're going through them. Because if you look at the history and the progression of human history, we are exactly going in the progression of this transformation from separation and from the imbalanced existence of feminine and masculine presence in our reality into unity. So all of the old constructs that were fundamentally built on these imbalanced perceptions will dissolve. Absolutely. But the question is, what will we put in place? Because we have to understand that right now our system is run. So, 175 companies own all of the companies on this planet. You understand? All of them.
Yeah.
There is a monopoly of power, supposedly monopoly of power. The illusion is that there's a monopoly of power and control based on the structure of this architecture of this reality. So in order for that to change, every human has to wake up consciousness and then make the choose consciously daily within their actions, within their contribution, where people put their money, literally, if they're investing time and energy in a sense, defunding and shifting this attention from these smaller groups of power back into the humanity, into the more organic. So what does that entail? First of all, we have to change as individuals. We have to go back to more organic way of living. So farming, literally, to be more self-sustaining and creating our own food systems. That's a huge thing, because one of the ways that humanity is enslaved is through food, sex. Mm-hmm. Okay, food, sex, and fear, right? So those are the things that are the manipulations of human race that keep us in hypnosis. So these are the things that we're going to be seeing major changes in. And right now we have another element, which is technology, with artificial intelligence looming, that any minute now that technology will progress forward. And this is why disclosure is very eminent, because the amount of information that this artificial intelligence is now processing is a godlike processing system that allows us to access even higher bands of information, which humanity is mimicking. Remember, nature, technology always mimic nature. We are those, the capacity that artificial intelligence is having of processing information is what humanity already has installed within them organically. So the cultivation of our intuitive faculties is absolutely essential to, let's say, the survival of the next 10 years in the transformation, because disconnecting from technology and activating the organic technology will be what will sustain the networks of intercommunication of a higher frequency for the collective. And so while humans are in survival, you cannot activate these faculties. So this will help us discern that, because there will be a lot of events that will happen that will try to push people towards states of fear and into states of feeling disempowered. That's a very, very strong thing, is the manipulation of power. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think there's going to be, because one of the things I believe might happen, we look at how technology is progressing, and we have this transhuman agenda where, all the people like Musk want to get us into running with a chip, and living in fake world, and then having full control over us, where we have some corporation. This is obviously the negative kind of agenda or timeline to keep people in this artificial world and fully under control and generate emotions that they love by living in fake worlds and things like that. But because the society is relying on technology so much, if, let's say, a person wants to function in society and get a job these days, they need to rely on technology. They need to have a smartphone. They need to know how to use the internet, all these things. So what I think might start happening in the next 10 to 20 years is that once this is going to move into that phase, if enough people start using these technologies, then this is going to become the norm. And, these people are going to be way more productive. They can communicate better, access internet quicker, things like that. And that might become the norm, forcing everyone else who wants to be a part of this society to also become transhuman. And then I think we might see a split of, certain part of population will decide to live in an organic way, and the other group transhuman. What do you think? Do you think this is likely to happen?
Yes, definitely. I definitely see that this is what the agenda wants to impose into humanity. is that there is a merge between the technology and ourselves, right? And so, but we have to understand that the element of control means that financial systems as we know them will dissolve. They'll become digital, which means that we become completely dependent on these systems, right? So the thing is that we have to look at the model and the construct of why the soul incarnate into the physical. The soul incarnate into the physical in order to, in the bigger picture, reunite all of its separate fractals into one. So we need to choose unity rather than separation. And even though these agendas might propose some kind of split and separation, the more that we go towards unity consciousness within ourselves, the more we will choose a more organic kind of timeline. But we're not going to be separate from technology. What that will allow us to do is to use the technology in a way that is holistic, okay? To use it in a way that we are thinking about the collective whole. And this is why so many people in the Silicon Valley are leaving these companies and making major changes, because they understand the amount of power that lies within this kind of technology, within artificial intelligence, and what's capable. With our ignorance of our own physical technology in our own bodies, we are extremely easily manipulated by connecting to the technology. And the way that we are, we have helped to build that, right? We have been using Google and internet and Facebook for the past, 15, 20 years. We helped input and program this consciousness, for the consciousness to eventually emerge from this technology. But, the way that I see this, what's happening right now is a cycle. It's happened many times in history, and many civilizations have gone through this process. And what we can learn from those civilizations is that when we come into harmony with the tools that we are using, and we use them in a way that is compassionate and in a way that is supportive to the evolution of organic humanity, then we do see the light at the end of the tunnel for all. But we have to understand that our time on social media, like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, that when we do that, we're actually contributing to the building of these, constructs in the future. So that's why those things have to change from the inside out.
Yeah, it's very difficult to think about how this could change when the corporations that can build these technologies, they're the most powerful, biggest corporations, because first of all, you need a lot of money to be able to build these types of technologies, and this system only supports selfish, greedy, parasitical kind of behavior in those corporations. So it's kind of like the self-sustaining parasitical system. And like you said, we are contributing and building it ourselves through our participation. And then it would be very hard to have alternatives without a lot of money, without enough people putting effort. I know someone. Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Did you finish your thought? I'm so sorry.
I just want to say finally that I know someone who, for example, tried to build social network called Minds.com with very little funding, and people are not so interested in joining anything that is not really working properly and things like that. It's always kind of, if you think about, let's say you want to go support a local farmer. A lot of people are lazy and they want to buy from Amazon Prime because they just click and it comes to straight away, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a lot of that is growing on our own convenience, laziness, and things like that.
Right. Well, I mean, it just reminds me of the saying that you cannot cure, you cannot cure an illness with the same kind of illness, with the same kind of illness. So actually what we need to redirect our attention is not building another technology to compete with that technology, but understand that you are the technology. You see, your body, everything that they're learning about AI, about the mechanisms of organic humanity, advanced concepts of energy and information systems are all based in nature. Okay, and you are that. So your activation of your technology, which is your ability to be telepathic, that's a very real thing. It's not a fantasy. We have that ability. The ability to remote view, to communicate and connect with people on the other side of the world simultaneously, right here, right now, through your mind. That's a real technology that we have in our body that was used and manipulated by the government in their own, military organizations. But we have that, and it's been suppressed from human mainstream, and it's been put into films from Hollywood and CIA in order to make us think that these are fantasies. But in reality, this is the real technology. So actually, these are the things. We are able to self-heal our bodies. This is a fact that you have absolute mastery over your cells in the organism in your body, that if you want, you can be in the presence of a virus and you can decide not to accept this in the body and biologically strengthen your immune system to not interact with these things. Okay, it's a fact that you can actually travel interdimensionally and interconnect with information, a network of information that is way more broader and advanced than the internet. And you can do that through your mind, through your meditation, through your connection. All of the ancient sages in history have demonstrated that for us and always report the same kind of results. There is a very specific architecture to this realm that we exist in. So this is where we have to put our attention in cultivating and mastering. And the people that are spending time in cultivating that are not going to be supporting another platform or another technology, because that's not where the solution is. It's an entire shift of humanity. And again, the external world is always a reflection of the internal. So actually, we create the reality that we exist in. And so the invitation is that you don't become parasitic in any way, because as soon as we look outside for something that we need, that we think we need, that we cannot give ourselves, this is where we become parasites as well. And so this can be with love, this can be with attention, with affection, with acknowledgement, and those root emotions of the human race that drive us into seeking to build, which has a positive thing, right? It helps humanity evolve, it helps things move in this world and create. We're extremely creative organisms, but as creative creatures, we have to redirect our creative power into the true technology, essentially, that's going to pull forward humanity. So I think that this is where the next 10 years are going to test humanity in a way, in each human discerning from themselves where they will place their attention and their energy,
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while in my content that, if, let's say, humanity would evolve differently, like a couple of last few hundred years, instead of living from ego, because everything in society is built from ego, right? So, corporations, they just want to sell as much as possible. That's ego, right? This is just to grow. So they are the biggest, all this type of stuff. So everything, information, the way news works, just to kind of, get views and make something look 10 times worse, or fear-mongering, things like that. But let's say if population will live completely differently, at the peak now, maybe the technology would be telepathic, like you said, from generation to generation. What we see as a fake telepathic abilities like internet and things like that, it would be natural.
Right. Yes.
But even when we look at these other races, they often use technologies. So you think this is going to be more kind of in balance, right? We're still going to use technology, but we're going to be more kind of sustainable, more organic?
Well, here's the thing, and this is what I see as an insider, right? A person that has contact experiences and also information connected from all the contactees that I interact with in my groups. The future of technology is 100% organic, 100%. Even the craft that these beings are navigating are an extension of their body, if you can wrap your head around that. Okay, so that's the future. That's what we are going to go towards if we make it that far. If we don't do something to ourselves before that. But essentially, because and why is that? Because when you depend on the material again, you are limiting yourself. There will always be a limit because it's finite. So when you're creating with materials that are finite, there's always an end and there's always a beginning to them. So the real future of humanity will essentially be this non-physical mastery of the non-matter. Okay, so and that require and that's what, if you just look at how humanity is evolving, right, and the things that we're focusing on, mindfulness, meditation, all those things are completely in our mainstream now. They haven't been like that 30, 40 years ago. You weren't really talking about that. Yeah. And yet we learn from the ancient civilizations, they had advanced technologies. We look at Egypt, the incredible technology that they were able to access. The Mayans, all of these ancient cultures are showing us the history of high-level technologies that we're not using computers and microchips and things like this. It was an advanced cultivation of the human body, the organism, which is actually the key to access that information.
This is what apparently, like some of these of pyramids in Egypt would be, that they would work as these amplifiers. Or apparently in Atlantis, a lot of technologies were like that they would just amplify your own abilities. That's right. This seems to be the path which is the positive path in using the technology for the benefit without.
Yeah, it seems that way. And remember that, we see all these old ancient civilizations that are now in ruins, right? That are dissolved. Now, this is another part that we have to remember, the higher purpose of this existence, which is non-physical. It's not finite, right? So everything is cyclical also. So as soon as you enter a high octave in the human race, they will dissolve they will dematerialize from this dimension, and it will enter into another octave of existence. So we have to prepare our minds to become very, very close friends with our understanding of death and the dissolvement of the physical and material as well. And that's something that's very difficult for humanity, because they are very attached right now to themselves, to their identity, to the things around them. And the future is really to practice and exist in that flow of non-attachment, even to the physical body, because eventually, these physical bodies, if we don't tune into these technologies, also another thing I want to mention, that when you activate the higher faculties, you also tap into longevity. And that's something that we need to understand, that if we transcend the cycle of death in this lifetime that is assigned to this physical body, the body begins to regenerate again. Okay, so we are ever regenerating organisms. And there have been a lot of studies shown, actually models that were created by artificial intelligence, showing what happens to the human when they surpass 150 years. The human starts to grow teeth. The human starts to regenerate the hair in the body. Okay, and we haven't reached that before. We haven't seen those models. So we are just tapping into this new understanding about these cycles, which, so.
I mean, there are all these stories about immortal yogis somewhere in Himalayas that they apparently can meditate and live hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because sometimes when I was meditating, getting very, very deep, I would feel like almost like I don't have to breathe, because I feel like I'm kind of, the prana is sustaining me. It's almost like you become a battery that just sucks the prana. And Yeah, maybe if people would put a lot of time and effort,
Yeah.
instead of going to work every day 8 hours, just sit and meditate for 8 hours, we would live a few hundred years. Who knows?
Yeah. Or at least we will exist in a state of non-suffering, which is really, really important. Our emotions and our states of non-suffering is what actually destroys the physical body. So we want to enter into those states of non-suffering, of creative bliss states, which is the embodiment of source. And that we can embody that every moment of our day. That's the hope.
Okay, so I still wanted to go back a little bit to this whole hybridization experience program.
Sure.
So first thing that comes to my mind is always like, are these, is it done with your consent? And do you think this is used because you made these types of agreements before? Or are you being used for this program? What do you think about that? Did you get to understand it?
Yeah, so it really goes back to understanding this multidimensional model that we are fractalized and we exist in simultaneous timelines in this moment. Okay, so if you understand that, then there's another layer to that. Well, if you exist in other timelines, how does that part of you affect the part of you that exists in this moment? And there is a very powerful correlation and intercommunication between your fractals. So parts of you, and remember, we perceive them as past life, future lives, because we have this very limited concept of time, right? It's very particular to human. But in these realms, you're looking at more of a sphere. Everything exists simultaneously and all in one. So you're at the center of that sphere. Whichever part of you is conscious becomes the center of that sphere, just like the universe. It looks like it's expanding, but everywhere that you go, it's going to feel that it's expanding from that place in the universe, right? So when we bring ourselves to the awareness, when the consciousness comes online by means of awareness, this is actually where you begin to access this information. Okay, so that being said, when we are introduced to these hybrids, the hybrid experience, we believe that we had these children in this lifetime. Okay, we could have had that child in another lifetime, in another fractal of ourselves. We could have agreed to have this experience to create that being in another timeline. But we don't know those agreements because we're not conscious. So it would require the human to become aware of themselves, their life, the agreements that they make in their life, why they incarnate into this family bloodline, because the hybridization is the utilization and manipulation of genetic data. Genetic data is the blueprint of the soul. The soul, which is infinite potential, is essentially stored within a holographic data system. And only 1% of that is making this physical body. Okay, there's other infinite aspects of yourself that are reading the same genetic data. So your DNA becomes extremely valuable, especially if in your ancestral lineage you have many generations of psychics, intuitives, people that have been training and cultivating higher mind. Because what happens is that when you cultivate higher frequencies, higher minds, you create mutations in the DNA, which is why all of the descendants of these Christ consciousness lineages, these very important bloodlines from which Rh negative also emerged. Rh negative is an example of the mutation in our human race. Okay, those kinds of mutations, and that mutation of that race cannot be traced back genetically in our history. So that's an example of a mutation. There are many other mutations that we are currently going to be understanding of human now. But those bloodlines, so these bloodlines from the origin of time going back to the inception of humanity, let's say in the era of Mesopotamia, but we have a way larger history than that. But let's say the origin of Mesopotamia, these bloodlines that were the origin of these three main races are holding information. They are the key to the creation of the matrix construct, psychologically and biologically. So those programs that are embedded in humanity were cultivated in groups of families very, very carefully through history. And those bloodlines were cultivated into the bloodlines that are in most power now. Okay? Because the information of the alchemy of life force, of primordial life force, has been manipulated through history. And all of that has to do with our sexual energy. Sexual energy is the most important, powerful life force that the human has, because with that, you can create the splicing of a soul. And the splicing of the soul is the ability to manipulate and utilize genetic data, which is vortex portals into species databanks. Okay? So, sorry, go ahead.
So it comes to my mind as a potential reason for some of these groups why they are involved in these programs. I heard about some types of grays that apparently they are us from one of the timelines when we went into the transhuman situation and we lost our humanity and then went underground. That's why they have these big eyes, because of the absence of light. And then basically through generations, they lost the ability, I don't know. So they basically, they lost all the humanity and DNA shifted and things like that. And that's why they do a lot of experiments, because they want to rebuild, go back to different forms. And I would assume that, if the soul is incarnating in those groups, they obviously karmically or whatever, they have to stay in these types of bodies for certain periods. So maybe, they try to shift into mixing the DNA so the soul can start experiencing different types of bodies. Do you think it could be some reason?
I think that's an interesting way to explain what could be happening. Yes. Now, the concept of grays having big eyes underneath the earth to see because there's no light, biologically, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to me, just biologically. I mean, we think of moles, and if we look at the creatures that live under earth, actually they don't really have very big eyes. They have very small eyes. So the biology of grays that have a larger head and a larger eyes, looking at the history of biology, is because they actually have grown a lot more gray matter, and they can transduce life force through their body more. They're interdimensional. Okay. This concept of people, of beings losing their ability to access their source or their soul ability, it's looking at it from the human filter, because in reality, everything is conscious. Everything is conscious around us. Everything has a consciousness. But the organisms that have the cultivation of their soul and are aware of that are more conscious. So when we become parasitic, we also disconnect from our consciousness. We become dormant, and we become like artificial intelligence. They just tell us what to do and we follow it. We program. We're just like that. We just become an organism that follows orders. So these species are also the same. They range in frequencies from the most unconscious species to the most conscious species. And the species doesn't really have a lot to do with that. It has nothing to do with that, really, because they're all hybridized. They're a combination of many different species, including we. We are a combination of many species. And again, the way that we exist in this construct is simultaneous. It's not separate. So Every single organism in this construct is moving towards some kind of evolution. So even beings on a high dimension, even they are evolving in some way. So that being said, the hybridization program is a parasitic program specifically within the three-dimensional plane, within this matrix, to sustain the soul inside of this matrix in cyclical patterns. That's what the hybridization program is for. However, the human, the one that gives the genetic data, has absolute 100% control, the influence and the output of the organism that is created. How do we know this? Because we are so deeply interconnected, and just look at our relationship with our children. Our DNA is in the child DNA is in us. Even more than that, we have cells in our bodies that intercommunicate with the child. So when the child is in danger, the mother feels it. So that kind of connection exists with all things, with all beings in this universe. When we have a child in the hybridization program, we are directly linked to that. So any kind of transmutation and ascension that we do as a parent is also driving that child and the evolution of that child. So we actually need to break the agreements, the parasitic agreements that we have made to create these descendants, and transmute the intention of the connection with the child into a higher octave. And we do that by integrating our own fractals and neutralizing our connection to them, neutralizing it, allowing this organism to have free will. Because what I notice is that a lot of hybrid parents, they get very stuck in the idealism of the hybrid children, and then they are not evolving, and neither is the child. So when they, and remember that as a human race, the more we go into this unity consciousness, we understand that nothing is separate. So it's the same with the hybrid program. The souls that are created are put into the reincarnation cycle to keep the human race going. But again, and this goes into a little deeper conversations about the soul. How is a soul created? When a soul is created through transmutation and alchemy, I don't know if you're familiar with alchemical sex and transmutation practices, such as the ones that are taught by Mantak Chia. Are you familiar with any of those?
I mean, I heard about Mantak Chia, but no.
Yeah.
If you could tell us a little bit about it.
Really briefly, this is very important because it's the missing link to understanding this hybridization program and why it's created. Because our sexual energy is the most powerful energy that we have within our body, it is manipulated and depleted from the body. Okay, so, when we have, just random sex, and we're always depleting our sexual energy, especially for the men, our life force is being wasted. And every single one of the semen is a connection to a soul and to genetic potential. Okay, so the use of that sexual energy in the transmutation, the cultivation of that, creates really powerful energy in the human. And so these are practices that were known by by all the elites in history. Every single royal family in history understood and practiced these things, which is why we have these royal families with activated DNA that have come into power, because they have inverted the use of that mechanism. Okay, they have inverted the intention behind this mechanism, still utilizing it. And so the hybridization program is about utilizing humans that have in many lifetimes cultivated this life force, sexual energy, because it becomes a seed, a very potent seed of life, that they can create hybrids. Now, the hybrids that are created by that potent seed of life can be used for good and for bad. And I guess the free will at that point is robbed from these souls when the souls don't wake up consciousness. When they don't wake up consciousness and they just allow themselves to be used in the system like us. So that's why as a hybrid parent, we have to end our contractual agreements to create children unconsciously, even in our waking state, because the children we create, they're also hybrids. And there's a kind of powerful self-organizing mechanism to this world that we are partnered with certain partners, and we create children not just by random chance. That in itself is a hybridization program that is a self-organizing of genetic data. And we don't know that, but actually in the higher levels, it is.
So you think you might agreed to it before, or you think in a way?
Sorry.
Because,
well, okay. So to directly answer that question,
because
yeah.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit confused about. You say it could be a little bit of both. It could be for positive agendas, for negative agendas.
What I mean by explaining all of this information is our awareness of how to utilize our sexual energy is what we'll choose if we are part of those programs. Okay, so if we are using sexual energy in a very wasteful, depleteful way in many lifetimes, we will be used for these programs, and we are consenting to be used for those programs because we're not aware of what we're doing with our sexual energy. If we understand how to direct our sexual energy, then we are consenting something different, and we cultivate that creative life force to create very intentionally. So some of these hybrids, we created them in intentional lifetimes. We made the agreements consciously. Okay, we're going to bring this hybrid being into this world. And the product is that those souls are highly activated intuition, highly advanced organisms that pull forward humanity. Okay, every single organism that is created is designed biologically through their vibrational frequency and genetic history to contribute to moving forward this ancestral collective humanity. But we play a very important role in that because we are one family. We're essentially one family. There's no separation. Even you and I, we have a relative in common just 2,000 years ago. So the influence that we have over shifting and healing humanity from our own internal work, that's what plays a role in the kind of choices that we're making. I hope do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, they are designed, let's say, genetically to propel humanity to become better organisms in a way, but most of them are not existing here, right? Because they're kind of existing in other densities, or they're outside of Earth, right?
No, we are hybrids. So we are created through the hybridization program. Our children are created through the hybridization program. And then, of course, we can be creating all kinds of children as well in other dimensions. Everything exists simultaneously. There are also cases where people create these hybrids and then later they have the child, or sometimes they meet the child, the hybrid child. There was a mother that had a hybrid child here. Years later, she connected intuitively to the hybrid child. She goes to China and she met the child that she had, and she recognized the child, and the child remembered the memories of being on board craft and being seated as a soul. You see, the physical body that we take doesn't really have much to do. It's the soul that's being created. That's the important thing about the hybridization. It's not about the physical vessel that's being created. Because remember, we are fractalized in the 3 dimension. So Geraldine exists in this dimension, but also simultaneously exists as a Pleiadian or Arcturian or reptilian or, whatever other thing, a maiden in some ancient village in France, I don't know, at the same time. We are existing like that. So it's not just one thing. And so when a hybrid is being created, multiple fractals of yourself are also participating in the creating of that one soul that is being anchored into the 3-dimensional plane. And we anchor souls in many dimensions. We anchor them in many dimensions. But again, to just highlight that you can ascend your fractals with your work. So your spiritual work that you do right here, right now, is affecting all the children that you're creating, all the souls, all the families, all the parts of you that extend from your, your center core.
Yeah, this is something, for example, when I had my experiences with psychedelics, I had these situations when I would reach the level of higher self. This is what I think it was like, because I still had a form, but it was like I was literally, whole of reality was happening in my mind. Exactly. And I could see everything in reality simultaneously. And I could see how everything is connected in the way, for example, where I need to shift, then my cousin's gonna heal, my brother's gonna heal, my relationship with my girlfriend's gonna heal, things like that. I could see how it's all connected fractally. And when I started paying attention, listening to it finally, because it was over the years, I would be shown it many times.
Yeah.
And I started healing. Let's say I quit alcohol completely. I started changing a lot of things about myself. At the same time, my brother started doing similar things. My cousin started doing similar things. So it's kind of, you're shifting into a timeline, let's say, where those fractals or aspects of yourself that are the most connected will reflect your shift, basically.
Correct. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I know it can be a little bit complex sometimes, but I think it's really important. I think we're ready for this information because, like you're navigating these realms, you're becoming aware of this, and a lot of people are too. So I think we need to somehow, hopefully, explain that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people also get to similar conclusions through different paths.
Yeah.
Sure. And maybe, like, when you try to explain things, they might seem complex to some people, but then someone else can try to explain similar concept a little bit differently. They might get it. But one thing I see is always like this: there is the same understanding of some of the big agendas, some of the big goals among different people. Everyone looks at it through their own experiences, unique experiences and lenses, but we more or less agree on some of the bigger topics, let's say. Is there anything else before we're gonna finish that you would like to cover?
That's it. That's it. Unless you have any other questions. I think I've shared a lot.
No, thank you for that. What about your services? Like, what is that you currently offer in terms of your sessions and working with clients?
Yes. Well, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and an epigenetic psychotherapist. So my area is primarily around doing hypnotherapy and also a modality that I call DNA reprogramming. And the root cause of your emotions and your limitations, we uproot those and we work with them. And it can be very, very powerfully transformative for the person. So you're just moving through your blockages. And then, of course, hypnotherapy, I use that for many different reasons, whether it's healing your body, accessing past lives. The important thing is to access the truth of your core soul and the purpose of your being here. So you can reach me at GeraldineOrozco.com and also my YouTube channel at Geraldine Orozco. I go really deep into all these concepts and explain them there a little more in depth. So just thank you so much for having me here. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing the story. And thanks, guys, for checking another episode of Truthy Podcast. Until next time, thank you.